Hey guys, it's Jake here with eTrailer. Today we have a 2018 Ford F-53 Motorhome chassis, and we're going to be taking a look at it, and I'm going to show you how to install the Roadmaster Exact Center steering stabilizer. When you have an RV, something of this size, when you hit little bumps in the road, or a semi passes you on the road, or just any truck or trailer of any size, what the feeling that you get when you're driving 60 or 70 miles an hour down the road is very, very unnerving. What'll happen is you'll feel that suction, and the wheels will want to, the whole RV is wanting to follow the suction from that truck when it passes. Adding a steering stabilizer is going to take some of that away. It's not going to take it all away, because you look at the size of the rig we have, you can only imagine how big of a steering stabilizer we'd have to have no movement. And at that point, you wouldn't be able to turn it at all because it would be fighting you too much. After I drove this, after we installed it, I drove this, and it is night and day difference. The steering before was just, it felt like a car. You could turn it, but when we would go over bumps, I could feel the wheel kind of chucking in my hand. And if you could imagine doing that on a 16-hour trip to Florida, that is exactly what a friend of mine who owns this RV, that's exactly what his fear was. As he took it on his first trip, he wanted to wait to see, to prove to himself that he actually needed these upgrades. He also got a front anti-sway bar and a rear anti-sway bar. Those are also Roadmaster products, and I can tell you he is going to be much happier with this after he takes it on his next trip. That trip to Florida was so scary for him, because any truck that would pass him, anytime there was a high wind from one or the other side, he didn't feel like he had control in the steering wheel. The whole RV felt like it was tipping, and that's where those anti-sway bars come into play. All three of these components, they kind of all work together, which is why I always recommend getting all three of them, having them installed. They're easy enough to install yourself, so you can probably do it at home. The one thing I would say is that you will need a pretty big torque wrench to install this steering stabilizer, because you have to take two of the nuts off of the factory suspension. It's not difficult at all. We're going to first run you over the test course to show you the difference and how it recenters. The one thing I will say is don't get your hopes up if you have to go underneath after you take your test drive. If you have to go back underneath and make a few adjustments. We do these all the time, and we almost every time have to go under and make adjustments, because we think that the wheels are centered. You can take your measurements, but when you drive the RV, it just feels different. I had these wheels perfectly centered, or from what I thought, and I went on the test course, and I was not happy with how it was steering. It was steering slightly to the right, so I went back underneath. I had my videographer, Tom, actually straighten out the wheels while I looked from far away, looked at it, took another measurement, put it back on, and now it steers straight as an arrow. So it's just a little bit extra stuff that you have to do in order to make your drive very, very smooth. So let's go ahead and run you over that test course, and then we'll take you inside and show you what it looks like. Now, one of the biggest reasons why somebody would want something like a steering stabilizer or the Exact Center is that, you know, when you're driving down the road, you want as much help to keep that RV straight as you can get. Front and rear anti-sway bars will definitely help. They'll help with the sway part of it, but when you hit a pothole or something like that on the highway, the Exact Center, what it's designed to do is to recenter you after you hit that pothole. If you've ever driven in a taller truck, or actually any truck of any sorts that has a solid front axle, they will have steering stabilizers on them, and a lot of times they're not strong enough from the factory to be able to handle the tires that people put on them. So having a steering stabilizer up there, it's just designed to fully center the vehicle. And when you're turning with this steering stabilizer, I can tell it's significantly, you know, more difficult to turn it. We are going at a lower speed, so it's going to be harder to turn anyway, but I can definitely tell that the steering is working against that steering stabilizer, which is exactly what we want. The amount of times that you turn in an RV going fast is not very many, if any at all, but when you're cruising through a campground or something like that, you can definitely feel the difference. If you just let go of the wheel, the Exact Center will bring it right back to the center every single time. And that's what I really like about it, because again, you need as much help when it comes to steering this rig as you can get, because they don't give you anything typically from the factory, and if they do, it's probably not going to be built strong enough to be able to handle the front end of this motorhome. There's a lot of weight on the front, so we just need as many tools as we can get to be able to help make our ride a little bit more enjoyable. Underneath, you can see the steering stabilizer a lot better. Essentially what it's going to do is it's going to attach to the axle and to our tie rod. And all the resistance that you're going to get to bring your tires back to center is going to be inside this boot. Basically what it's going to do is when you turn, it's going to want to compress this, but once you let go of the wheel, it's going to want to bring it back out to the exact center, hence the name. But yeah, this essentially is what it's going to look like. It's very important when you're doing this to make sure that your wheels are straight. You can break out a tape measure and measure from outside of the tire to the outside of the tire on the front to make sure that, and on the back, to make sure that your front tires are straight, because it's going to want to bring it back to whatever you have it set at when you install it. To begin our installation, we'll need to start by, on the passenger side, remove these two nuts from our shackles, our U-bolts that go over top of our springs. Now, what I recommend, you'll see here I got penetrating oil on. I sprayed that on about 3 hours ago. So you definitely want to spray that on. The way penetrating oil works is that you spray it on early and it'll work its way up through the threads and help to bust these loose. I put a little on the top and on the bottom just to help it loosen things up a little bit. We're going to take a 28mm socket and pull these two off, and that'll help us to be able to put our bracket on. I'm going to save this hardware because it will be going right back on. Now we're going to take our bracket that comes in our kit. Depending on what side your sticker's on, our sticker is going to be on the bottom with this slotted hole closest to the passenger tire, and then this hole is going to go on this one. So you want to slide it up into place. The reason why this one hole is slotted is because this bracket's designed to fit various types of motorhomes. So they just put a slot in there so it'll fit other types. But we want to put that up and then take our factory hardware and put it back on. Make sure your bracket is tied up against the frame and zip those up. Want to make sure that your U-bolt is straight on the top of your leaf pack when you're tightening these down, and then you want to tighten them evenly because you want to do that every time you're tightening hardware on a U-bolt. Now we need to torque down those two factory nuts on that U-bolt. I will say this torque setting is extremely high, so you'll definitely need to go to the store, rent a torque wrench that's high enough to reach the specifications in your vehicle's owner's manual. Now we need to take our bracket that goes on the other side of our steering stabilizer, and you'll want the bracket to be underneath the tie rod, and the U-bolts need to be fed in from the top. Just using the flat washers and nylon lock nuts that are included in your kit. To get our steering stabilizer in place, we'll take the included 3-inch bolts, and we will have a flat washer on top, and then we'll also have another flat washer and a nut. Once we raise this into position, you'll want to raise it up, hold it in place, and then take the flat washer and the nylon lock nut and thread it on. You want to leave all this hardware loose until we get everything installed. Now we can take our other bolt with this bracket loose, Take our other bolt, and we're gonna go over top with the steering stabilizer this time. Slide our bolt up through the bottom, then put on a flat washer and a nylon lock. Now with the stabilizer installed, now we can tighten down the bolts, the U-bolts on our stabilizer bracket. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that your tires are square facing forward because this is going to become your new center. This is going to recenter to whatever it's set at right now. We've got ours set at that, so we can go ahead and tighten these down. We'll use a 14mm socket to do so. Now we'll come back and torque down our hardware to the specifications and the instructions. And we can come back and snug up the remaining hardware. Now once you get everything tightened and torqued to the specifications and the instructions, that's going to do it for the installation. So we've got our exact center hooked up, and now we need to test drive it for a little bit. Do not be surprised if you have to make any adjustments. As you can see here, I'm rolling real slow, and I'm holding the vehicle straight by holding the wheel, and I let go and it immediately wants to turn because that's the exact center working properly. So you can hold it wherever you want, and then if it continues to turn. So what we'll have to do is we'll have to go in, make a few adjustments, straighten our wheels out more, make a few, loosen all the bolts, and then come back out, test drive it again, and make sure that it's holding square. Now that we've made our adjustment to our steering stabilizer, we'll go over our straightaway here and see how it does. So we've got the wheel slightly turned. If we let go of it, you can see that we are driving perfectly straight now, which is exactly what we want. The way that we had it before, it was just, I'd say there was probably only a ½ inch difference in the turning of the RV, but with this exact center, you can tell when it's not exactly in the center. But like right now, we're driving perfectly straight. Before, we were just turning ever so slightly. I mean, it would probably take us 50 feet to even notice, but you can definitely notice when you have it installed correctly and when you don't. Well guys, hopefully this video helped you decide whether or not the Roadmaster Exact Center Steering Stabilizer is right for you in your 2018 Ford F-53.